regarding Psyops campaign and Russian influence in Serbia. I was speaking with you last week, and you told me this really ramped up around 2010. Give us an idea of a backdrop of how the history of this Russian influence in Serbia.
So again, what we see right now in terms of Russian influence in Serbia, this is nothing new compared to what we've seen since, I would say, since 2014 specifically, because Russia has invested tremendous resources in social media space, in the media space. You have RT that is run from Belgrade. You have Sputnik that is run from Belgrade. But the very first fact that they are run from Belgrade, it doesn't mean that they are for the Serbian audience only. They're also for the wider Balkans audience, given that people can read, the same language. Not only that, when we are talking about Russian influence, I would actually like to talk about Russian malign influence now versus Russian influence operations, because they are different. In terms of Russian malign influence, Russia has been investing, again, tremendous resources in sports, also in soft power through music, through, for example, movies. There are numerous now collaboration between Serbian and Russian artists. Russia has also invested tremendous resources in the Serbian Orthodox Church. So let alone in energy sector. But this is only, when it comes to Serbia. But we cannot perceive and analyze Serbia only through the Serbian lenses, because Russia has been influencing also other parts of the Balkans. For example, in Montenegro in particular, that was a perfect example of how Russia used the same strategy to polarize the Serbian and Montenegrin Orthodox Church, exactly in the same way that there was a dispute between Ukrainian and the Russian Orthodox Church. I have never seen such a huge role of the Serbian Orthodox Church in politics that I've noticed over the past few years compared to, for example, 10, 15 years ago. Russia has invested also a lot of resources in social media influencers. But now the real question is why they're doing that and what kind of messages they're portraying. To begin with, why does Russia even care about the Balkans? Why would it even care about influencing the region? As I told you last time, Russia actually never cares about occupying the region. They do not need the Balkans for the territory expansion. They need the Balkans as a European soft underbelly that is always under, some sort of fire, so they can actually add fuel to the fire and have the Balkans always on the brink. And I want to emphasize, one thing, which is every person in the Balkans who truly care about having the peace in the region should thank Ukraine right now for fighting, because Putin's goals was also to inflame the Balkans and have another conflict over there as the second front, so the West pays attention to the region and be distracted from Russia's war in Ukraine. In Kosovo, for example, what they are doing in a very successful way, they're also using religion to gaslight people and to polarize people, claiming, that Kosovo is the home. They call it like the heart of Serbia.
Remind us again in the West how much of an influence the Orthodox Church has on culture and politics.
It's huge. So let me just give an example to go back even to the Stalin era. Even Stalin did not fully abandon the church. And that is because even for the Soviet Union, the intelligence understood very well that can be a powerful tool for influence operations inside the country. And the same thing is happening right now in Serbia. It's not that those people are genuinely religious people. I always like to say, since when they have been after communism, so many religious people, in Serbia. But here is actually the trick. The way that Russia is using the Orthodox Church is to polarize people through communist and techniques. I have never seen something like that before in my life in Serbia. What we are observing right now is exactly suddenly the polarization, because allegedly Chetniks are those far-right people who were very aligned, with Nazi, but they valued about conservative values and the Serbian and the Serbian world, versus communists. They perceive them as basically traitors who were more aligned, with the West because of, which is really a paradox, because during Josip Broz Tito, Serbia was the home of non-aligned movements, right? And it neither belonged also to the East, but nor to the West. And that's, precisely why you have such a polarization, right now within the society. And the Orthodox Church has, even during the Milosevic era, been a tremendously important tool to rally their people and to also rally the far-right nationalists. So what
it's
we are
just a
observing
vehicle.
is just a vehicle. Exactly, it's just a tool. And it's fascinating. They started making even religious linked music. They started promoting traditional and moral values, claiming that the West is going after the Serbian Orthodox Church. Exactly, Bradford, what we see right now in Russia, that Patriot Kirill is saying about the church. This is exactly what, unfortunately, we can also see in Serbia, in terms of that, the fake decadent values from the West are going after Serbian Orthodox values.
Which is nothing new. Dostoevsky talked about the decadence of the West.
Exactly.
That sounds like a very cynical take. So the people promulgating this aren't necessarily Orthodox. They just know that this will rile people up and it works as a political tool. Absolutely.
That's precisely how Milosevic was using the church, and Vucic just understood also that can be also a powerful tool, for his regime. And Russia has also been using that as a tool to link it to the Russian Orthodox Church and to polarize the Balkans even further. But yes, using absolutely the same strategy. It's not, I always like to say, you have to perceive the Balkans through religious lenses, because that has been one of the most potent weapon in the hands of malign actors who never wanted the Balkans to be free and peaceful.
As far as Vucic and people of his ilk, they're not necessarily devout. If we were to follow them around in their private life, they're not religious people. We could
I would not say absolutely. I mean, look, even Milosevic, he was a communist, and nevertheless, he used very much religion as a source of how to rally his own people and how to add fuel to the fire, because especially in societies that are poor but also nationalistic prone, all you really need to do is to add that flavor of religion to rally people. And for example, I was baptized, in the Serbian Orthodox Church when it was not even cool to be the part of religion, and I genuinely I genuinely, like to go to the Serbian Orthodox Church, but it's fascinating, for example, now seeing all those photos and videos, how they even teach you how to behave in the church and the promotion of the Orthodox Church. It really ruined for anyone who genuinely wants to be aligned with those values. They made all of us sick and tired of
cynical.
very cynical about it. We always, all Serbs who are, in my view, genuinely aligned with the Serbian Orthodox Church and share those values, we actually mock, now the church that it's just a Serbian BIA, which is like a KGB tool. So we have become very cynical.
So what interest does Putin have in this region beyond proximity and geography? Is it just a matter of this, I need a buffer against the West for Russia, or is there something deeper here?
So certainly there is also ideology because of the Serbian and Russian Orthodox Church and values. But I don't think that that's the only reason. I think number one reason for Putin, he has been planning this whole thing and his war in Ukraine for a very long time. And the Balkans was also the part of it because having his proxies in Serbia that he has been investing in for many years, having proxies in Serbia that can inflame conflicts, exactly what we see right now in Kosovo, where you have injured NATO personnel. What a great opportunity for Putin to show that NATO is nothing more than a paper tiger. And also, we should not forget that even during the Trump administration, Montenegro, for example, joined, I think it was actually during the Trump administration, but certainly North Macedonia joined NATO. And having American isolationism and having a conflict in the region between, for example, NATO and non-NATO member state was the question whether Article 5 would be involved. Now it's easy in 2023 to say something like that cannot happen, but I'm not sure, 5-6 years ago, whether that would have been true or not. So that's, for example, one of the ways. And the third thing is, again, having Balkans constantly on the brink and having the West paying attention more to the Balkans than to Putin's neighborhood would be a dream come true for Moscow.
So it's a matter of where to focus attention and the optics.
Absolutely. But also don't forget that also Putin has numerous ways that he is also acting from the Balkans to challenge the West through the proxies. I mean, there are numerous, even information operations that are run, through the Balkans. You just recently had Serbian criminal gangs who help a Russian who is on a wanted list and who was supposed to be extradited to the United States to flee to Moscow. Serbia never imposed sanctions on Russia, so now you have numerous companies that operate there. What a dream come true, for sanction evasion. So it's like it's very complex.
You were telling me that there were more Z symbols in Belgrade and people are, quote, obsessed with Russia. Can you explain that? What are the implications there?
One of the most fascinating things for me looking at the region right now, especially Serbia, like it has always been cool that you, learn English language and to listen to American music. Like it suddenly has become so cool to support Russia. I mean, I have never seen something like that in Belgrade. Now my friends, they report, even people who I know who are there from Russia, that there are like more Z signs in Belgrade than you can see, on the streets of Moscow. This is probably exaggeration, but you can actually see something like that. And I think that particular link is not natural. This has been cured over the past few decades, specifically for the past 10 years, through the soft power, through the music, etc., etc. And also there is another thing. A lot of people in the West, even those people who were pro-Western, they have become very disappointed in the West because Serbia is not the part of the European Union. They believe that the West has abandoned its values, and they support um, um, the far right regime. But not only that, I mean, the general sentiment also with Russia is linked to the nurturing of nationalism, and that's exactly something that you see right now in Russia among the Z generation. Always, when people ask me if I believe that after Putin there will be democracy, I don't believe so. As a matter of fact, I do believe that Russian youth is even more nationalistic than older generation, and that's unfortunately something that I've noticed in Serbia too. Like when I remember when I was at school, and every year when we would finish the school year, we would listen. I mean, the Western music in those parties. You could literally just now go to a YouTube and take a look at how those school parties look like. It's not even they're listening to some folk music. It's like a hardcore nationalistic music that promotes the Great Serbia. And it's like a part of psychological warfare. And I do believe that it comes from two sides. On the one side, it comes from Russia, because I also see what Russian Telegram channels are promoting. But I also do believe very much that it has a lot to do with Vucic's government, because he understands very well the more nationalistic people are, the more control he can have. And having less and less people who are independent thinkers, and a lot of people left Serbia since he came to power, and none of us want to go back. He couldn't care less. Actually, I think he is better off without people with different values.
That's interesting, though, that you say young people are more nationalistic. Typically, it's older people are more conservative and stuck in their ways. And do you think that just because young people don't have a historical context about what came before?
I would say so. I mean, older generation, they even in Russia, like older generation, they experienced Russia during the Cold War, and also Russia during the 90s, and also Russia during Putin. A lot of people, they cannot even talk about those things publicly. In Serbia, it's a very, very, similar situation, where you do have people who experience the Milosevic regime and who do not take security and peace and democracy and freedom for granted. The problem with the younger generation, it's also ideology, thinking, how they're going to have the new generation of younger Serbs in 30 years who will, accomplish this great Serbia, dream. A lot of those young people, they do not have opportunity to travel because Serbia is a poor society. And when you add fuel to the fire by amplifying and promoting far-right nationalistic narratives through music, through rap music, I mean, you should just hear the lyrics of those songs. It's really dangerous because it works. And a lot of those people that never experienced the 90s, they cannot compare, for example, to say, well, Milosevic was using exactly the same strategy to gaslight people.
Because they don't know any better.
They don't know any better. Exactly. And that's exactly, unfortunately, a friend of mine, Ian Gardner, he just published a book, Generation Z, related to Generation Z in Russia, and why he fears that even youngsters in Russia will be even more nationalistic. I mean, you just really have to see all those schools that they organize promoting Russian fighter jets, and all those games among people who are among the kids who are going to kindergarten. And very similar violence is exactly, unfortunately, what I see among the youth in Serbia. I mean, just even their physiologists, when I was when I was in my high school, it was like cool to be a hipster. Like,
Yeah.
you can imagine all those New York hipsters. So it was like kind of like a cool to be something like that. Like now, a lot of young people in Serbia, they look like those gangsters with very short hair.
The
Like,
tracksuits.
yes, tracksuits and stuff like that. Exactly.
This takes us around to winning the battle of hearts and minds. You were talking about the, because I follow you on Twitter, you said something about the naivete of the West. And I don't know, I get this sense that a lot of leaders here, they think very linearly, whereas the 20th century, the time of despots and dictatorships, that's in the past. We don't have that anymore. We don't have to worry about that. In the 90s, you had the end of history and this idea of U.S. hegemony, and we're going to light the way forward. But history keeps rearing its ugly head. You see these movements, and everything you're describing, it sounds like things that happened in the 20th century kind of resurging. And I mean, like, it seems to me we should be paying more attention to these things and not taking it lightly. What should we be doing differently? Because like right now, it seems like we're just kind of pushing this under the rug and not taking it seriously. Like, how can we be winning the battle of hearts and minds in the 21st century?
So let me first give you the big idea, and then I can talk about the Balkans in particular. Like, after the Cold War, you're absolutely right. The United States and the West naively thought at the end of the history, everything will be fine and democracies will thrive. And the United States in particular was using influence operations during the Cold War, winning hearts and minds globally. I always like to joke that the only reason why I'm in the United States because of American psychological operations, like through jazz music and American modern art. I remember when I moved to San Francisco, I immediately took the membership in San Francisco Museum, and all my American friends, they were outraged why I really had so much respect for American modern art, whether Ellsworth Kelly or fill in the blank. Like, I'm a huge, fan of so many American modern artists. And then the United States stopped investing in the soft power by winning hearts and minds in Eastern Europe after the end of the Cold War. I always like to tell people the reason why Russia looks like this is in part because the West stopped promoting the values over there. You should really go back and to watch on YouTube. There is a fascinating video from after the end of the Cold War. It was a rock concert. You could really see like an incredible energy among the Russians and belief and smiles on their faces listening to American rock music. And nowadays, it will be very difficult for the United States to promote American values over there because the Russians don't want to live anymore in American dream. They want to live in Russian dream. Like, you have more than 50% of people, actually, I read 56% of people who think that Stalin is a great leader. How are you going to actually support your values in a country that believes that Western values are decadent values? And as a matter of fact, I mean, also American liberal values that are right now will not resonate with a lot of people who live in authoritarian regimes. So the problem right now is that the only way that you can actually use influence operations to begin with is to neutralize influence operations from your opponent. I just give an example, and this is going to sound like really ruthless to many people when I say this thing out loud, like in the U.S. But culture matters and perception matters a lot. And as I said, the Russians, they don't want to live in American dream. They want to live in a Russian dream. So let's give them a Russian dream. For example, We could, for example, push the narrative that Russia could have been an amazing place, but it's Vladimir Putin who destroyed with his poor performance in Ukraine and destroying, destroying the Russian reputation. Another, for example, would be I just recently, for example, wrote a piece on the CSTO, which is the Russian version of NATO. The CSTO did not help Armenia when it asked with the help with Azerbaijan. What a great opportunity for us to actually tell the world that Russia is not anymore a great power and that Russia is not a credible and reliable ally. There are a lot of people, for example, inside Russia, that's like Putin's nightmare, thinking about ethnic tensions. And we do not need to spread lies. There are numerous problems, for example, in Tatarstan, where they deprived their leadership of their rights. What a great opportunity for us to use that and to tell people in Tatarstan that they should be fighting for their rights. So I understand that for many people, something like this would be terrified in the West. But either you can live in the Disney world, or you can do things that can actually advance our national security. And now to go back to the Balkans, if there is one thing that I would love to see the U.S. to do, as I mentioned last week when I spoke with you, was to promote jazz music and to promote American values. That's not going to work because, again, Serbs, just like Russians believe in the Russian world, Serbs believe in the Serbian world. And how are you going to target a far-right nationalist? One of the ways would be actually to tell them that the Russians are not their credible ally. I mean, I always like to say, for example, Russia didn't help the Serbs in 1999. We should mock them for that, using, influence operations to tell, the far-right Serbs that their ally Russia was not there when they needed it most, that Russia imposed sanctions. Or, for example, where is Russia right now? When it comes to Kosovo, they're just going to use them and to throw them under the bus. So unfortunately, it's very difficult right now to use influence operations to win hearts and minds. We should be doing that to actually neutralize Russian influence operations. Right now, actually, there is something very interesting going on. It has been actually going on for years. So Russia has been pushing agenda that NATO has caused the increase in cancers in Serbia because of the use of depleted uranium bombs in 1999. That's what Russia has been pushing. And there was even a lawsuit against NATO over there. And they've been pushing agenda, that the U.S. is running biolabs across the world. The whole, typical Russian information operations campaign. Well, maybe someone should actually in Serbia talk about Russian Chernobyl and actually how it caused a lot of damage in the Balkans. Or maybe, to declassify some information about Russian biolabs and their games, with monkeypox and smallpox.
Basically just highlighting all of their shortcomings and their mistakes.
Absolutely, but not through the perception, Russia is morally a decadent place, because that will not resonate with nationalists, but rather to emphasize that Russia is small, that Russia is losing, that Russia is not an ally. Those messages will resonate with a lot of people, because I would say that Serbs and Russians, they're very proud, they're very emotional, very loud. And you have to, in our national security strategy here, like in our national security, we also have something that's called like a perception management, where you have to take into consideration someone else's culture, how that person or a country process information about values. And I think that's tremendously important, because Russia also has something very similar, which is called reflexive control. And that's how they've been reflexively control us for years. And maybe it's time to turn the tables on that.
What about the role of humor? I see your tweet from earlier.
Yeah.
What did you write? Which is kind of accept that millions of people can't stand him, and this is a grassroots movement. He loves to emphasize that he's a rational actor, but he's driven by emotions.
True.
The Serbs really know how to hurt him. Mockery, satire, humor, funny memes are the tools to impressionable dictators can't stand. What role does humor play in mockery?
Yes, I mean, I also wrote that humor is a strategic, non-nuclear, most powerful weapon against dictators because they have a big ego and they really, really hate to be mocked. I mean, just think about Stalin. Stalin even had like numerous laws that he did not allow like jokes inside the Soviet Union. Putin has numerous laws to punish people who criticize him. In Serbia, there is no such a thing, but there is still a thing that ego plays a tremendously important role. And Serbs can be really ruthless when it comes to this thing. You know, I cannot, for example, I didn't want to share a lot of those memes, but they are like really ruthless because they understand very well the culture. They understand very well, you know, what will resonate with people and dictators. And the humor is very important because it can also rally group around one thing. It can also be used to put your enemy on the defensive because when you mock them, what are you going to answer? Nothing. Like it's so, and sarcasm and satire and using, you know, now with social media, different gifs and different memes. That's a very, very powerful tool, and it has always been. And the Serbs have a huge respect for Black humor. And that's something that can resonate with a lot of people. So
the role that pamphlets played in the Cold War.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I will never forget, people always, you know, ask me why I'm so interested in psychological warfare, in addition to be, you know, when I make a joke to claim that I'm a victim of American psychological warfare when it comes to music and art. I actually was also very intrigued by NATO influence operations in 1999. I will never forget the situation. So NATO was flying planes and they were dropping leaflets talking about with pictures of Milosevic on the papers and talking about corruption and you know that you can actually find now all those pamphlets like on the website. I will never forget this thing. When I was in Belgrade in 1999, people were spreading rumors that we should not pick up those papers because the Americans put like a poison on it to target the Serbs, which really tells you all you really need to know, that back even during the 90s, how powerful Serbian intelligence has been with influence operations and psychological warfare, because that's an asymmetric tool that is not that costly, but with powerful effects. And this is precisely why both Russia and Serbia, for example, even today, can leverage that against their own people, but also against the West in a powerful way.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left. Any final thoughts you would like to tell our audience? Anything you want to promote about your work or what's next in store for you?
You know, actually, no, not about my work, but I would like to maybe just have a few seconds just explain why I do believe that the United States should go on the offensive when it comes to information operations. I do believe that this is a very powerful tool, and I'm oftentimes really devastated to see that the United States is not leveraging that enough. Again, I don't have information on what U.S. intelligence is doing, and I hope there are people out there thinking, you don't even know what we are doing. But nevertheless, I do believe that there are numerous political constraints in this country that do not allow us to leverage that powerful tool. I'll just give you an example. The way that Russia, for example, is going against us when it comes to influence operations by weaponizing the First Amendment and fighting with each other, both Democrats and Republicans, is a dream come true for Russia. And while it would be very difficult for us to constrain the freedom of speech here, the best way to do it is really to go on the offensive and put Russian intelligence on the defensive, so they spend their time, energy, and resources defending themselves from our information operations. We do not need to spread lies, because the truth is on our side. And never forget that this war right now, even outside of Ukraine, is a war between the good and the evil, between different ideas, very, very similar to what we had experienced during the Cold War.
All right. Ivana Stradner, thank you so much for speaking with me. I enjoyed this.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, be sure to like and subscribe. Regimes Museum is a non-profit educational institution that studies the phenomenon of tyranny and dictatorship across history and culture. Find out more at www.regimes.museum.org.